The Autoblog Podcast is presented by the Salvation Army. Your donations help those in need win their daily battles to survive poverty. To give, ask your smart speaker to make a donation to the Salvation Army, or make your gift at salvationarmyusa.org.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today on the phones is consumer editor Jeremy Korzeniewski. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. And in the studios here, assistant editor Zach Palmer. What's up, man?
Feeling good on a Tuesday morning.
It's a little earlier than we do the podcast. We were just saying that. But hey, let's jump right in. We'll coffee up and do this right. So we've got four vehicles we're going to hit on. A couple of Nissans. The Nissan Maxima. Yeah, they still make that, believe it or not. We're going to talk some sedans here. It's a pretty nice car, actually. Later on, we'll talk about the Nissan Pathfinder. Yeah, they still make that. Special edition Rock Creek edition. It's kind of cool, actually. We'll hit on the Mercedes Metris. This is basically a cargo van. And Jeremy spent some time in the Mazda 3. This was, I believe, an all-wheel drive hatch. Is that correct, Jeremy?
An all-wheel drive sedan, as a matter of fact.
Sedan, okay. Well, that's a pretty cool car. Then lastly, we will spend your money. It's a truck one. We're going to talk about a small truck. So a few different options there. That'll be a fun one. So let's jump right in with the Maxima. This is a very nice sedan, very big sedan. We had it in the fleet last week, and I believe parts of this week. It's very nicely equipped. It's basically, if you like sedans, you would likely like this car. They don't make too many large full-size sedans anymore. This one came in at, $45,865. Had to pause on that one. That seems like a lot for a Nissan Maxima, but it's pretty nice. 300 horsepower V6 engine. It has the CVT, the X-Tronic transmission, as they call it. Lots of comfort and convenience options here. Very nice sound system. This was Bose with 11 speakers. Comfortable. Plenty of room inside of it, too. It had this sort of saddle leather interior, which I think was really nice. I like cars like that. Reminds me of sort of like old school watches that have that very rich leather bands with like almost a patina to them. But overall, I liked it. We could get a little bit more into it. I've talked a lot, though, Zach. Quick reaction from you.
Yeah, so I actually just hopped out of it this morning. I have always been a bit conflicted about this most recent Maxima, just because of the history surrounding it. You know, it's the Ford DSC, the Nissan four-door sports car. And, this one is a lot bigger than the Maxima has always been. And it's certainly, not the same, four-door sports car that it has always been. But I still think that there's a lot to like with this car. Just like you were saying, it's a big, luxurious sedan. There aren't many big, luxurious sedans at this price point. You're looking at like Toyota Avalon, Chevy Impala. And this one, it has that fun V6 engine. And the CVT is definitely one of the better ones out there. It really tries to mimic a regular automatic transmission. It's pretty quick to respond. You throw it in the sport mode and the revs peg right up and it starts just shifting away, just moving the revs around as you're accelerating. But no, I think like the really like important thing to realize about this car is just how nice it actually is inside. That tan leather is just gorgeous, and it's great materials. It's really, most Nissans in their lineup don't have as nice materials and look as nice on the inside as this thing does. And I think it's really important to recognize, that this is a super nice sedan that you get into. You obviously pay for it. Ours is like $45,000, but at the same time, it's a very nice car.
I think it's important to note that basically the conversation about like a four-door sports sedan, as Nissan tries to like make this out to be, that's a really long-running conversation. For the better part of this decade, I think. I feel like every time they either refresh or bring out a new version of the Maxima, people are generally, there's some consternation over that. I feel like everybody tries to put the current gen up against what previous ones were, and then also how we sort of remember them to be. And sometimes I think we get these almost like rose-colored glasses, because you remember what the Maxima used to be, and it used to be a pretty great thing. I think now this is a little more of a sedate luxury car, essentially, especially in platinum trim, which is, a very high zoot trim. It's really loaded up. I have sort of made my peace that I don't truly think this is a very sporty car. I think it's huge, for one thing. I mean, this is like Dodge Charger, Chevy Impala, Ford Taurus. I'm not sure if that's actually still in production, but
it's not. Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, it's done. I mean, this is like barge-like territory, which has some merits to it. I mean, I'll go to my car seat analogy. I put my son right behind me, which is in a car. That's a pretty tight thing to do when you have the car seat right behind the driver's seat. Plenty of room, more than some SUVs I've been in lately. So that worked out pretty well. V6 is pretty good. And to your point, it's a well-rounded powertrain. That CVT, they call it the Xtronic. I had to do a double take. I was like, what the heck is an Xtronic? Is pretty solid. The manual paddles, I thought those were pretty cool. It was fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, it honestly surprised me a bit, just because just like you said, you look at those old Maximas with the rose-colored glasses on, and then you look at this thing, super big sedan, and it even cornered a little better than I thought it would. It's no super agile torque vectoring magical corner carver, but it tucks in nicely. There's it's controlled as far as the amount of body roll that you get. When you're not trying to have a little more fun, it's a very comfortable cruiser. It soaks up the bumps well. I wouldn't call it as comfortable as like the Toyota Avalon or the Impala. It's definitely a bit firmer than that. But I think this car is a bit more fun to drive than those as well.
Jeremy, I know you didn't get into this one specifically, but just any thoughts on the big sedan segment, where it lands, if you think it has any relevance these days? I would argue it does, but your take on this sort of segment. And when is the last time you drove a Maxima?
I have driven the most recent Maxima. I think they came out with a refresh for the 2019 year. Am I right there?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I did drive one right when they came out with that with this refreshed version for 2019. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty nice car. Like, taken on its own, in a bubble, get in it to drive. It's got a lot of power. Nissan's V6 engine has been, it's not exactly a powerhouse, but for just like what you think of as a sedan, it's got plenty of power. I think it rides and handles pretty well. Here's the funny thing about the big sedan segment traditionally is that they're big on the outside, but not particularly on the inside. And that's been true of like this idea of personal luxury for a long time, like is going way back into the 1970s, like the Pontiac Grand Prix of the world that were considered personal luxury cars. And I think what kind of the downside is, or not their downside, but what is dragging that industry down is the market's desire for practicality. People, if they're going to be having a big four-door sedan, then they want something that's really roomy. And I think that's part of why crossovers have kind of taken over from sedans as the family vehicle of choice. And I think that's why big sedans like this just aren't all that popular anymore. And as we've gone over here, like, a lot of them are completely falling out of the segment entirely. The Maxima is a holdover. And, for those very, small number of buyers that still want that kind of thing, want to make a style statement without, requiring the practicality of it, then they're cool. It's a fun car. It's a great car. It's stylish, and it runs and drives and handles pretty well for what it is. Certainly better than you'd get out of a comparably expensive midsize crossover. This is definitely going to be probably more fun to drive. But you're giving up a lot, I think, in the practicality side. And I think fewer and fewer buyers are willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I think basically sedans have become what coupes were before. You buy them for perhaps a style-making statement, if you will. No one buys these for really any form of true functionality, even though the trunk is huge in this thing and the back seat was pretty comfortable, I thought. And the front seat was pretty comfortable. Like it's decent sized in there, but compared to some other vehicles, it's a sedan, and same with its brethren. It's one of those things where, like, are you going to buy a Chevy Traverse or a Chevy Blazer or, something like that? Or are you going to get the Impala? Of course, most people are going to get the crossover, the SUV version. So,
right.
Go ahead, Jim.
I think Nissan also has to compete in its own showrooms. That the idea of the personal style, personal luxury vehicle, that's exactly what the Nissan Murano is too. Things of that ilk, the Nissan Murano, the Ford Edge, that they're going after the same buyer and finding a lot more success on the crossover side than they are on the sedan side.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you sort of go back and hear what Ford has tried to articulate with their sort of move away from car strategy, it does make sense on a very basic level. If you sort of look at buying trends, what people say they want, it's kind of hard to argue that going away from sedans is the wrong move. Now, that being said, the way they probably, laid that plan out, as we've said on this podcast multiple times, is probably not the best way to have laid it out. They should have just quietly killed the Fiesta and the Taurus, and then figured out a graceful exit for the Fusion and been done with it. But so it goes. All right, that's my diatribe on sedans. Let's move on to cargo vans, I guess.
Cargo vans.
No easy fade there. This is the Metris.
Speaking of practicality.
Yeah, this is all about practicality. What did you think of the Metris, Zach?
So I drove it home one night. I didn't use it for what it was supposed to be used for, transporting a ton of stuff, because the one that we had was an actual 2-seater cargo van with a completely, barren, stripped out, massive cargo area in the rear. But the thing was weirdly, okay to drive. It's super comfortable. It was obviously very loud, but there's enough power to get up and go where you want. The transmission is nice. The tech is very, very old at this point. It doesn't really match up with anything else in Mercedes lineup at all. But that's not the point of this thing. The point is to move stuff around as efficiently as possible. And it was a very comfortable, easy riding van to do that. But I know that you actually moved some stuff around, so I'm excited to hear about that. Yeah,
it's interesting you say though that you didn't use it for functional things. I think that's actually also super relevant though, because I was driving this thing, not loaded with anything, and I thought to myself, it's the driving dynamics of this are different than I would have expected. You took it all the way out to Ann Arbor.
I did, yeah.
So I mean, you got a good taste of the suspension, the steering, the motor, all those things. And I mean, basically that sort of stuck out at me the first part of my time with this, because I drove from my house to this other house on the other side of, the city, if you will, that I'm doing some work on, cleaning out. And I was just like, wow, it's big in here. You don't drive vans with that much open space behind you. It's like being kind of in an empty room with no insulation. It's a little unsettling. Comfortable, totally agree.
Yeah.
That's a really good suspension. For this segment, I think it's better than any of the the Ford vans I've been in recently. It's been a while since I was in a Fiat or I believe the Dodge Caravan. You could still get something like that and work spec.
Yeah, you can.
Which sells pretty well, if I recall.
Yeah.
So suspension, pretty good. I was on the Southfield Freeway, which is kind of a bumpy road around here. And again, soaked it up all pretty good. Steering was surprisingly good. I thought it would be tough to like maneuver this thing. It really wasn't, but the mirrors in the blind spot do take some getting used to, I think, especially like tight, quick turns. I made a hard right off of Woodward, and I was like, whoa. Almost didn't even see that guy there.
Yeah, that's definitely something, that I had to adjust to quickly because it is a panel van, so there are no windows in the back. So you really have to pay attention to your blind spots and always be looking in the mirrors. Thankfully, the one that we had did have blind spot warning, so you could, somewhat rely on that. But at the same time, you're looking, you got to look a second time, and it's like, all right, especially, I drove it home in rush hour traffic.
Gutsy move.
Which, but hey, there are a ton of people that drive these around every single day for their jobs. They have to do the same thing. And I think that, the combination of it was a pretty large mirror with a blind spot system was plenty enough to make me feel safe and that I wasn't going to actually hit anybody.
And that's what you're looking for in vehicles like this is just make sure you're not going to run anybody over, whatever. It's par for the course. But visibility overall was decent. You could sort of have that good, in front of you kind of view, if you will, good seating position. I put, I put a lawnmower and a snowblower in there, which there was almost too much room because at first they were rolling around a bit. So I had to stop at a hardware store and get more bungee tie-outs and really secure these things in all different ways. I put a box behind. I feel like it was the lawnmower was the thing that kept really moving. It was a little lighter. They both had gas in them, which kind of made me start to get nervous as they were starting to rattle. But yeah, obviously for a job like that, great. You just open the doors, lift them up, and in they go. I did consider trying to cram one or both of these into our long-term Forester, which if you put the handle down, they'd fit.
Probably.
But little tighter, little tougher. This was just why wouldn't, if you have a vehicle like this, why wouldn't you use it this way? And of course, what's nice about this too is we had that, what did we have? That big Sierra a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we had a big Sierra heavy duty.
Yeah, I thought about putting them in there, which would have worked out great too. But with that, you really got to tie those things down. With this, it's okay, hey, I know these things aren't going to, if I didn't tie this right, it's not going to go flying out onto 75 unless multiple things fail here. So certainly it really, demonstrated for me just how obviously useful these things are for in the workplace. And then just if you have a need, they're very functional.
Yeah. On top of that, I'm sure that the liftover angle, the liftover height was way better on that van than it would have been on any truck.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was my brother and I just kind of lift them in. And then when I got home, I just kind of brought them down myself. Not that big a deal. It was fun. I like this segment. I think it's cool that companies are still investing in it. Yeah. Specifically Mercedes. This isn't a segment that in this country they've really had much of a footprint. And 4 or 5 years ago they said, no, we're gonna build sprinters and have a facility in the United States. It's somewhere in the South. I'm forgetting exactly which state it's in. And they're all in, and it's, to me, it's actually almost, the vehicles are very good. And my question almost is in this country where Mercedes does mean luxury, it's to be the pinnacle of luxury in many ways. It's a little bit of, you get some cognitive dissonance as you're trying to like wrap your head around a Mercedes work van. In Europe, totally different story. There's police cars, there's taxis, there's work vans. They're one of the largest industrial, companies, conglomerates in Europe, specifically in Germany. So it's not as big a deal. Here, I kept finding myself thinking, it's kind of wild rolling around with this Mercedes badge on my van.
Yeah, no, there's some weird touches on the interior, like the heated seat button, exactly the same as you'll find in a C-Class, E-Class, whatever. It looks just like it. The buttons on the steering wheel, there are a whole lot of, carryover parts that if you've driven some other new luxurious Mercedes, you'll see on this Metris, be like, wow, okay, yeah, just chuck that part on there. But no, I actually had a weird amount of fun driving it home too. Like it tucks right into a corner. You know, it doesn't feel like all roly-poly like a giant Mercedes SUV might.
Yeah, you'd think it would feel more tippy, I think, than it does.
But it's not. It's weirdly agile for what it is. But you know, that's vans for you, because they're not, you know, lifted 4 or 5 inches off the ground, and it's more of the ride and comfort of a very large car than anything. And I was expecting something, you know, a lot more harsh in a cargo van. You know, maybe there's some more stiffness to the springs, firmer shocks in the back to handle whatever load you have back there versus a passenger van. But thing was great. Thing was really, really impressive.
Agreed. And this one actually has a pretty familiar powertrain. Let's see, this is a 2-liter 4-cylinder that makes 208 horsepower. So that's a pretty widely used engine, direct injection turbo, 7-speed automatic. So Mercedes is certainly putting some, you know, pretty good pieces of hardware that it uses in this van. I think they're really transferring a lot of their like really good technology. Again, the infotainment system that we both kind of riffed on. I don't know if I'd even call it an infotainment. It's a radio with some, like, you can put your phone into it. I mean, whatever. That's life. But I thought that was pretty archaic. It's funny, we talk about how we want simpler infotainment systems. Then when you get one, you're like, oh, yeah, a little touchscreen functionality or something is a little bit better.
Did you actually manage to get your phone hooked up with Bluetooth? Because I couldn't figure it out. I tried for a long time.
I was playing a podcast from my phone, just leaving the phone like in the cup holder or something.
No,
I couldn't get it to work.
I spent like 5 or 10 minutes in the parking lot before I left for the night. I just, you know, there's a phone button there, and you try and get the Bluetooth to add phone, but it would not work.
Yeah, it was wild. I was listening to, like, I think I was streaming like NPR, a podcast or something, and I'm like, whatever, I'm just gonna listen to it ambiently. The road noise I thought was interesting too. It was somewhat loud in there. Like when we say this
Definitely.
is good, it's good relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And I haven't been in a panel van in quite some time. So I found it was more pleasant to open the windows and just kind of like have it be just like a breezy day versus like sitting in there with the windows up and having it be like quiet but also rattly. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you could hear everything going on in the back. You know, you could hear the exhaust coming through the panel van, all the bumps in the road. But you know, those are just things that I completely expected from a totally barren metal shell. So
this one came in at $39,000 with quite a few options on it. The suggested retail price, though, base price is $31,200. So yeah, there's stuff on here you don't really necessarily need, maybe you don't even want. Like there's a safety pack with Parktronic, that's $2,300. That's kind of helpful actually. But, you know, driver comfort package, I'm not quite sure what that was. Tinting for the rear windows, roof rails were $400. Destination was another $1,100. So, you know, I don't know. I think you could strip some of this stuff out. LED light strip in the load compartments. No, that's a pretty good deal.
That's
that was
probably
$210. I'd pay for that.
Want, yeah.
So, I mean, basically, you kind of got to figure out do you want, like, you know, whatever this driver efficiency package is. Quick backstory. I was on the launch of I did a Sprinter Metris trip in Colorado a few years ago. This was quite some time ago. My drive partner was actually Alex Kirstein, and he was not working for Autoblog at the time. And I had relatively, you know, just started working for Autoblog. So that shows you how long ago this was. And we were driving back, I think, to the airport. And he basically, he was in the van, I think. And I think he was in the van. Anyways, the Mercedes like van director guy was going over one of these stickers, and he kept just pointing at things and saying, yeah, I couldn't tell you what that is, or I don't know. So it was sort of the point that, like, generally everything you get on a van like this has a purpose. And if you don't know what it is or don't need it, is like, you know, sort of layman, if you will, that's kind of where you fall. So I think you could get this a bit cheaper, but very nice vehicle overall. Jeremy, any van thoughts? I know you didn't get into this, and we've kind of been sort of ignoring you for a few here, but have you been in a Metris lately or a Sprinter?
I mean, I haven't driven one in a while. I've been picked up in them here and there. We do these trips from time to time, and I actually got picked up in a Metris within the last year or two on a trip that I went on. And I kind of like, I was mentally going through the same thought processes that you guys have been going back and forth through for the last 10 minutes. It's just such a weird segment, right? Like there's this class of vehicle, the Metris, like the Transit Connect, those kinds of things that seem like they were obviously designed first and foremost as a vehicle for commercial purposes. But they also sell versions that have, carpet and seats and cup holders and plugs and stuff. And it's like this real weird intersection of utility and like family usefulness. I actually am attracted to the idea of like a very utilitarian vehicle that is converted to be used as a family car. I also think it's really cool that this class of vehicle is like starting to be used by upfitters for like cool like camping vehicles and off-road kind of adventure style vehicles. So I'm happy that the market that the segment exists. It's a little depressing to see minivans in general like getting no love from buyers and not much from car companies, as they're not really investing in that segment too much. But yeah, I mean, Metris is cool, and I think it's really cool that you can buy a like utility vehicle here in America that has a Mercedes badge, because that's kind of like Mercedes bread and butter across the rest of the globe. So I think it's cool that they sell it here.
Cool. Couple footnotes and we'll move on. The Mercedes plant is in Ladson, South Carolina. Wouldn't have guessed that, but I probably would have guessed it was down in South Carolina. That's where they make the Freightliner and Sprinter vans. Mercedes Metris vans are reassembled there. So I believe they build them somewhere, probably in Europe, and then reassemble them here. So let's move along. Mazda 3. You were in the sedan version of that, Jeremy. What did you do with it? What did you think of it? And then we'll answer the question sedan versus hatch. I know where I land on that, but
same.
Yeah, I really like the 3. What was this like, Jeremy?
The 3 is great. Like it's just a legitimately really good car. I've driven it in a couple versions now. And every time I get in it, I constantly think, man, like this is such a good car. It's almost like I get into a Mazda 3 and I think, what else would I need? As a day, I don't have kids, so I'm not putting car seats in. So I know, Greg, you'll have a different take on its interior roominess. And as an aside, I would say that that's the biggest downfall of the Mazda 3 is that, at least in the sedan that I had, there's not a lot of space, particularly in the back seat. I adjust it. I've gotten pretty used to these days getting in cars, adjusting the seat for, I'm over 6 feet tall. I adjust it to how I want to drive and I get in the back seat. Almost every car nowadays is designed to fit 2 6-footers. The Mazda 3 is borderline. It's not super comfy in the back seat, but as a driving car, especially for a couple like my wife and I, it's just so good. It does everything well. The engine, transmission seem like perfectly paired and matched to the to the class of car. Could it use more power? Yeah, absolutely. Everything could use more power, but it's good enough. It handles really, really well. The driving dynamics are just, spot on. There's pretty much nothing that I don't like about the Mazda 3. The one that I had was all-wheel drive. I expected it to take a hit in efficiency, but I still did really well. I was always in the 30s on all of the trips that I went. I was driving on the highway a lot, but I also took it on just normal daily driving duties to the grocery store and just to friends' house and things like that. I really think that Mazda nailed this generation of Mazda 3. we'll talk about the hatch versus sedan argument as it goes on. The one that I had was a sedan. And yeah, I walked away from it just super impressed by it. And thinking like, if someone wants a car they just need a car, but they really like to drive, the Mazda 3 is like the go-to recommendation.
Sedan versus hatch. Zach, we'll start with you.
I'm definitely leaning heavily on the hatch side of the argument. So much so that my girlfriend actually just bought a Mazda 3 hatchback with a manual transmission.
That's so awesome. So you get to drive it at times.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
The thing is just so lovely. She actually got hers in the Soul Red with the red and black interior.
I think it's exactly what I would do.
So, yeah, no, it is like the most perfect spec Mazda 3. And, Jeremy, just like you're saying, the high points, is driving, and then also the interior is just flat out gorgeous for the segment. There's nothing else for that amount of money that you can get that looks that good, feels that luxurious. And the hatchback shape, I was a little bit torn on it at the beginning. I thought it was a little bit much, too much style, too little practicality. But I'm completely won over by the looks. It is just such a smooth, elegant car. So yeah, 100% hatchback for me.
Yeah, hatch as well. I think the silhouette is gorgeous. I would go with that red color as well. What's that? The color?
Soul Red.
Soul Red, perfect. Very soulful. Always been a fan of the Mazda 3. It's just, literally since I was first in press cars, I was like, this is like one of the best driving cars you could get for that money in that segment. It's always been a great sort of style statement, again, to use, seems like the phrase of this podcast. Mazda's manual transmissions are golden. The clutch action, the throws have I'd say the perfect right, just feel and length. It's a very engaging powertrain. Interiors have gotten much better just in the time that I've been in press cars. And I think you really the materials are better. They've done little things to add stitching in the right places, use nicer materials. Still have never had, this would be an issue with me, I think, but I'd probably get past it. Don't love that infotainment system.
Yeah.
It's that knob thing. It's a little not intuitive. I think if it was my car, I'd get used to it. But, oh man, a car that I would look forward to driving every single day. Yeah, that's awesome. That's, I think, such a fun car to drive. Jeremy?
Yeah. I am going to fall on the hatchback side as well. When I first saw it, I thought similar to what Zach said, that it's overstyled. And I think in pictures, it is a little bit overstyled. It's super swoopy. It's got kind of big pillars in the back. There's a lot of sheet metal there. But then you see it in person, and you've got the perspective of standing over it, walking around it, and it totally works. It's just a beautiful car. So the question, is the Mazda 3 this generation's BMW 3 Series? The car that all the journalists would say okay, this one ticks all the boxes. This is the one to buy. This is what you want. This is the driver's car of the segment. I think kind of.
I think it's really, really close. If they had one with a little bit more power, I think that then it could maybe rise to the level of an older 3 Series that it's the driver's car for everybody. I think it's the perfect daily driver, but I'm not sure that it can be your daily driver, your sports car, all those things yet. With the manual transmission, it's very engaging, but it's still about 0 to 60 in 7.1, which is plenty for just scooting around town. But I think I'd want a little bit more power, if it was going to be the ultimate driver's car that I would recommend.
I think, to your point, Zach, it's getting close. I guess I'd have to do some more research and see on my Instagram and Twitter feeds how many of our fellow writers are buying these things for their own, personal driving uses. It's pretty good, though. It's highly enjoyable. Let's put it that way. So let's move on to, this is total random one, the Nissan Pathfinder Rock Creek. Wow. This was a bit of, I would say, almost like a prehistoric vehicle driving it. I like it. I mean, as I've said on the podcast, I like driving big old school SUVs, even if they're technically 2020 models. This one, 45,425. So it was actually less than the Maxima, which is interesting. Quick thing here. Would you buy the Pathfinder like this or the Maxima? You get one of these cars you can steal. It's yours. This is just your gift. Which one would you take? Because they're identical prices. I'm just curious.
I'm taking the Maxima. It's not even close. Yeah.
I think I might take the Pathfinder. The Maxima is definitely nicer and better. But I just really like big troop transporter SUVs. And if somebody's going to say you get one of these for free, yeah, I'd probably take the Pathfinder. I don't know. Anyways, this one, 3.5 liter V6, 284 horsepower. So less horsepower than the Maxima. And, again, it was north of 45 grand. Had a lot of chrome and accents, things like that. Lots of different, comfort things going on inside. 10-way power driver seats. Heated seats, all those good things. This Rock Creek trim, which was actually only roughly about $1,300, which I think is random. Oh no, excuse me. Let's add another $2,100 for the premium package. Didn't see that. I just saw the Rock Creek edition, which was $995, which seemed a little light. So all told, you're adding about close to $4,000 actually for this Rock Creek thing, which I would not say is worth it. I just, I don't know. It sounds cool. It seems like something somebody in, the Pacific Northwest or Colorado might like, but then I don't know. You just get a lot of different, black mesh grille, black roof rails, black door handles, a lot of different sort of blackout treatment, nicer audio apparently. And that's about it. Some Rock Creek seating surfaces and badging. Couldn't really tell you what those are other than they appear to be like cliffs in the seat backs. I don't know. What'd you think of this one, Zach?
Yeah, so the Rock Creek, I think, is playing right into the, everybody wants a rugged SUV or crossover, but this doesn't actually bring the off-road capability along with that. It gives you the looks, which, is something that a lot of people want these days. They don't necessarily want a super rough riding SUV, but they want it to at least look that way. And that's what the Rock Creek gives you. It gives you these, they're pretty cool wheels. And then all the Rock Creek badging everywhere. So it just says Rock Creek. There's several badges on the exterior. You get floor mats, like you said, the seats. And it's a whole lot of makeup on the Pathfinder. I think it looks good in some colors, like the color that Nissan launched this with was this really, really cool forest green. And I think that color with all the blacked out trim, the black badges, I think it looked great. The one that we had was pretty stark white. And I think that the contrast is just less attractive.
Agreed.
On that color.
It's harsh, I would say.
It's definitely harsh. And I think maybe it makes me like the Pathfinder a hair bit more, but at the same time, I'm not completely sold on that color. I would 100% take a different color with that. But that's, I actually drove this SUV for a whole weekend. Put a decent amount of miles on it.
Not a bad weekend car.
Yeah, no. I, weirdly ended up having to throw a ton of stuff in the back, so it was actually pretty great that I had an SUV.
Fairly good-sized vehicle.
Yeah, no, and, didn't have to put anybody in the third row, but I did try that out just because, this is a car that, a lot of people, they might be throwing kids back there. So that's one of the main reasons why you'd want a 3-row SUV, and, it's one pull up on the seat back and the whole thing just slides forward and out of the way. It's actually one of the larger openings that I've seen back there. So I was pleasantly surprised by that, by how easy it was to actually, get people in and out of there if you need to. But despite, the decent utility, this thing needs a heavy technology refresh.
Big time.
I remember you walked in the other day and you said that it felt like a car that was back when Obama was the president.
Yeah, first term.
Yeah, first term. And that's, there's no Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto. It does not have anywhere close to the newest Nissan infotainment in there at all. The gauge set is also feels super tired. It's somewhat confusing to navigate through there with the steering wheel buttons. There just isn't a whole lot there as far as being up to date with some of the competition. This is at $45,000. You can buy yourself a Kia Telluride or a Hyundai Palisade or a brand new Ford Explorer.
Yeah.
And, I think I take all those cars over this one in this segment.
Even a couple other ones like the Dodge Durango, which is getting pretty old too. I think I like that better. It's just, to me, it's like, I guess if you've maybe had a Pathfinder before and you're looking to just kind of get something slightly newer. I don't know. To me, the buying case for this is not great right now, just because it does feel like a very dated vehicle. It's still a big vehicle. It still offers plenty of size, capability, things like that. But I think we'll just move on from there and spend some money. We got a good one this week. So this writer is coming from the Twitch stream. Is that correct? Tis, yeah. This is
the Twitch stream.
This comes from our video gaming stream. So thanks for watching that, and thanks for writing into the podcast. We really appreciate it. Hey, please engage with us. We think that's always great. So here is the question. I'm looking for a small truck to carry tools and do small work. What would be a good recommendation? Want to be able to at least parallel park and carry a load if I have to. So not specific drivetrain, so fairly, willing, open-minded here. It does need to be reliable, easy to work on, and the budget is at least $3,500. Autoblog, please help us out. So, Jeremy, why don't we start with you?
This is tough. And it's tough specifically because of the $3,500 price point. That's at the very bottom end of what I would think you could get, what you'd classify as a reliable vehicle. And a pickup truck, that is even more difficult because a lot of these trucks are used a lot, for heavy duty. Well, not heavy duty stuff. We're looking at smaller trucks, but for work, So I did a lot of searching on this when I saw this question come in. I'm interested to hear your takes on it. I found a couple Honda Ridgelines for around $4,000, like when I did a nationwide search, if you're willing to travel for it. Maybe you can negotiate a little bit, but that, I think the Ridgeline might fall just outside of budget unless, do your local scouring and searching. And I thought, man, he wants something that is easy enough to parallel park. So I'm thinking he probably doesn't want a full-size truck. Maybe you can get a better deal on one, but I thought, the Toyota T100 came in before the Tundra, is kind of like a size just down from full size. I looked around and I did see some decent Toyota T100s. Again, when I did a nationwide search, you can get something American. You can get a Dodge Dakota or a Ford Ranger. The Dakotas I was finding in that range, with high mileage, like maybe circa 2006 or so with the V6 engine. You could get a late 90s to early 2000s Ford Ranger, again, probably with relatively high miles. But that's a very long preamble. And here's where I fell. I would search out for a 2004 or newer Nissan Frontier. We kind of think of that truck now as just like kind of old and uncompetitive with the latest crop of mid-sizers. But it's basically the same truck that came out in 2004. They've made updates here and there. They've done, little things to make it better throughout, over the years, but the guts of it are pretty much the same as they were way back when. That means that there's going to be a lot of parts. Easy to get work and service done on it. It should be fairly reliable. So that's where I'm falling on this. A 2004, 2005, 2006 Nissan Frontier. At that budget, you're going to have to, look really hard, be willing to drive maybe even a couple hundred miles to find just the right vehicle. But that's where I landed.
Zach, any ideas?
Yeah. So I heard you mention Toyota T100 there. That's my brain went to Toyota as soon as I saw this. I'm like, all right, what's an old Toyota truck he can go for? Something small and reliable. The Toyota Tacoma. And basically, you should look for a first gen. I believe those started about 95. And I did a pretty exhaustive nationwide search, just like you, Jeremy. And you can find them. They're going to be higher miles. They're going to be over 150,000 miles most likely to get it under your $3,500 price point. Maybe even more. Maybe even around 200,000 miles. But if you search out and you find one that's been taken care of, maybe you find a 1 or 2 owner truck, somebody that uses it to commute or just do super light work, I think that you're going to find yourself a super reliable, simple, and just really great truck to own and drive around all the time. So,
yeah, that's a good answer. I think one of our senior editors, Alex Kirstein, would probably concur with that.
Yeah.
He's got, does he have a first gen Tacoma?
I'm pretty sure his is a first gen.
Yeah. So, were you finished there, Zach?
Yep. I've said my piece.
So, Frontier, Tacoma. I actually was really leaning towards Ridgeline with this, but then I kind of forgot how some of the older ones looked. And I was like, oh yeah, these were not great. So that actually pushed me back towards the Frontier. That's where I would land, primarily because, Jeremy, you laid out my thoughts pretty well. It's not all that different than what you would buy new. So this is almost like the closest thing you could get in this budget range to a new car. Now, the caveat is they just haven't updated the truck in forever. So there's that. I would probably stay away from the Ranger. Those things, especially towards the end of their life, they were getting pretty rickety, if I recall. I remember driving one of those things like literally the last week a Ranger was in the press fleet, and it was rough, man. It was rough. So yeah, that's how I would land too, is see the best Frontier you can find and enjoy your new Frontier.
You know what I really wanted to find and recommend when I first saw it come through? I wanted to find like a nice looking, not rusted out, even if it had high mileage, I wanted to find a Jeep Comanche with a 4-liter and a 5-speed.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
They do not exist at this price anymore.
I believe that.
I think, all the cheap ones were probably bought up and have either rusted to nothingness at this point, or people have got them and they're like, you know what, I'm going to keep this truck for that price. I would. If I were sitting on a nice old Comanche with a 4-liter, I'd be like, well, I'm not going to sell this thing. I'm never going to replace it for anything that I like better. So I was a little surprised. When I saw it come in, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be the oddball of the group and say a Jeep Comanche. I'm gonna find one from 1991 or something, or 89 or something. This is, it's old, but these 4-liters are great and reliable and durable, and you won't have a problem finding parts because they sold 1 billion XJs, Cherokees. I couldn't find one. That was depressing to me. I feel like I used to be able to find them at that price. So it stands out as a vehicle. It's like, oh man, these just aren't around anymore.
It's really entered that sort of sector of vehicles that you don't necessarily think of them as being collectible, but they're going down that path. Right. Late 80s, right into the 90s, there's some pretty desirable vehicles that are sort of going from just kind of rough and tumble things people have in the garage to people are restoring them, so to speak, and making them look very nice and then charging plenty of money. Like that XJ we wrote about that we saw on some listing site. I'm forgetting if it was eBay or Bring a Trailer. Beautiful vehicle. And it was, I forget what the price was, but it wasn't cheap, and it wasn't just like a used high school or college car, which is what these things maybe were as recently as 5 years ago. They still probably are, but now they're entering this different realm. So For those of us of a certain age, that's kind of, I don't know, I have mixed emotions about that. It makes me feel kind of old, but also, I'm glad to see this sort of generation of vehicles is, really starting to be appreciated. So we appreciate all of you listening. Thanks for this great Spend My Money question. I understand that the writer is a fan of our, video game stream. So, hey, stay on that. Let us know, maybe on the stream, how you, what you're thinking of doing. If you have any more questions, let us know on that. Everybody else, thanks for listening. Have a great week out there. Be safe. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.